Welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial, and in today's episode, well, we're gonna revisit the graphics settings panel. We're gonna create something different. We're gonna have possibilities that we can change the graphics, resolutions, qualities, all kinds of stuff, enable, disable VSync, frame rates. There's not all the settings that you might imagine you could have, but I'm going to show you the tools how you can make even more settings. This is very simple. This is a very basic concept behind it, and with just being able to change these couple of settings, like these are the most important ones, you shouldn't have any issues to change any other settings when it comes to graphics. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing that we need is the actual widget itself, which is going to contain all of these buttons and all these settings and all that stuff. So I'm going to right click in the content browser and create ourselves a new user interface widget blueprint, and I'm going to call this UI settings. So inside of this widget right here, for now, all I'm going to do is add a border just so that I can see whether this thing actually got displayed on the screen, and that's it for now. So let's go back to the content browser. Let's look for our third-person character so we can actually display this widget before we can start creating these settings. We got to make sure that we can see the widget. So what I'm going to do is on begin play, I'm going to go ahead and create this widget. So create widget, and let's select the class, which is the UI settings, and then let's promote this to a variable, and let's call this settings widget rather. Settings widget. There we go. So that's that. Now let's choose a key or action mapping or whatever for to display and hide this widget. So I'm going to use the keyboard P key event for this one. And let's see. So let's grab our settings widget and let's check is in viewport. Basically, we just created the widget and we never deleted that. We never destroyed it. So it's going to stay in our memory. It's going to be available through this variable, but since we just created it and never added it to our screen, it's going to be hidden. So whenever we click the key, we're going to check if it is visible, whether it is in our viewport. We're going to do a branch check over there, and depending on whether it is or it's not, we're going to do something about it. So let's grab our settings widget. Now if it's let's begin with true. Now if it already is in our screen, then we want to remove from parent, like so. So on true, we're removing it from the screen, and also we probably want to get owning player so that we get the controller, because for the controller we want to set show mouse cursor back to false, because we will probably want to hide our cursor. We no longer need it. We're back in the game. And another thing is we need to focus back on the game from the widget, so we need to set input mode game only. So this way we are going to remove the widget from our screen, remove the mouse cursor, and focus back on the game. Now if the widget is not yet been added to our screen, or at least is not yet on the screen at this point, then from the false route, from the settings widget, we want to add to viewport. So we want to add this widget to our screen, so we connect that to the false. And we want to do basically the same thing we just did over here. So again, from the controller, we want to set show mouse cursor, and we want to set that to be true, since now we need to display the mouse cursor because we displayed the widget. And also we want to set the input mode to game and UI, so that we would be focusing on the UI. Now the widget to focus on needs to be this settings widget. So drag that in and we're good to go. So now if we hit play, if we hit P, there should be our widget. Here we go. So that's that, all good for here. So go ahead, just close the third person character. We are no longer really going to need that. Now we need to create some design for our settings panel. So this is going to be something like this for me. I'm going to anchor this to the middle of the screen. I'm going to set the size to let's go ahead and set 600 to 700 perhaps. So we're going to have minus 300 minus 350. So it's middle of the screen. And let's change the brush color. So basically the background of this one to be black and 0.5 opacity, so it's transparent essentially. Now we need to add all kinds of things to our panel. I'm not exactly sure, I did not plan this ahead, maybe should have. Again, that's bad on my part, but I'm gonna add a couple of settings, but I'm not gonna add all the settings. But you will be able to add these settings very easily once you understand how this system gets done, because previously we ran console commands. Now we're going to use nodes, because back then I wasn't aware that there is a node like this, but this node is really amazing and makes this whole thing very easy. So first I'm going to add a vertical box, and just for the whole area, so everything gets piled up basically vertically. And then inside of this vertical box, I'm going to add a horizontal box. I think this is very similar to what I did before as well. If not, well, then yeah, I don't know. But it should be very similar. So we have the horizontal box in here. We need a text first, or yeah, we need a text so that we know what this is, what setting are we changing. So I'm going to call this window mode, I guess, or yeah, let's call this window mode. Okay, there we go. And then we're gonna need a couple of buttons. So we're gonna need a button over here. We're gonna need 2 of those, and we are going to need another text field. So it's gonna look something like this. There we go. So I'm gonna set this to be fill, so that these settings would be at the very end. And for these buttons, I'm gonna add a text on top of them, and I'm gonna add the text on top of them just for a single reason, and the reason is I'm gonna have these icons on top of them, so they're gonna look like this. I know those triangle-y thingies, whatever they're called, but this is how it's gonna look. Then I'm gonna just change the color of the buttons. So I'm gonna set the buttons, maybe something like black should be good. Then I can just right click the normal and paste it over, hovered and pressed. And I can do the same thing over here, paste exactly the same settings over. There we go. So that's that. Let's see, make sure you anchor your text, align your text to the middle. This one as well. This way it's going to look a lot nicer. So we have one line like this, and I'm going to make a couple of more, and I'll be back in a second. So just Control W, and let's start naming our settings. So these are going to be the main settings that we are going to change. Like I said, there's a couple of more. You will see this along the way, and you will be able to add these using exactly the same methods that we are going to use right here in this video. We're gonna have window or full screen mode. We're gonna change resolutions, change shadow, texture, and foliage quality, enable or disable VSync, and cap our frame rates. This is very important to cap your frame rates because you don't want to have a problem just like New Worlds did, where it burns video cards for no apparent reason. So we are all good. Now, just to make your life a little bit easier, go ahead and rename your buttons. This is going to be quite important so that you know which event key events, basically click events, you need. So just rename these buttons, and I'm going to call this like, let's call this window. We can have window plus, and we can have window minus. So actually this should be the other way around. This should be the window minus, and this should be the window plus. So I'm gonna name all of these like so. So this is gonna be a resolution minus and resolution plus, and I'm gonna go through all of these buttons like so, and I'm gonna rename these so that it is a lot easier for me to know what I'm supposed to do with these key events. There we go. So I've renamed all of them. Good. So we are good with that. Now let's go ahead and let's open up our graph real quick, and we need to create on-click events for every single one of these. So select every single button and just start clicking on the in the details panels on-click events, and we're gonna need those for every single one of our buttons, because obviously every single one of our buttons is going to change some kind of a setting. There we go. So I have all the on-click events for every single one of those buttons, and I ordered them up a little bit, and we're gonna start with the more simpler ones, and then we're gonna proceed with something that is maybe a little bit more difficult. Basically, it's not like really difficult, but it just requires a little bit of a more code. So The first thing that we want to do is go ahead and find out what values we actually need to change, because there are like these settings are like built in. They are not using the console commands like the other video that I created do. I wasn't aware of this node back then. It's a very helpful node and it makes our life a lot easier. So you're going to be able to change even more settings. Just simply follow these steps and I'm going to explain everything in a second. So first thing that we need is, let's look for a node get user settings, get game user settings, this node right here. And then from here we can get or set basically any setting that we want. So for example, what you can do is look for a set and you have a bunch of options. Now we're not going to change all of them. Like I said, we're just going to change a couple of that you just saw in the designer, but you can go ahead and change even more things like anti-alliancing. You can run the benchmark tests. There is there was something called run benchmark. Just look for a benchmark and you're gonna get it. So there it is, run hardware benchmark. From that you can get a lot of information about what could be the more recommended settings maybe. So you can change the frame limits, qualities for all kinds of things. For example, we don't change the shading quality, post-processing quality, visual effects quality, view distance quality, all kinds of stuff that you can add on top of this. But we're going to change only the ones that, well, I showed you in the designer. So let's start with the first one is the VSync. So we want to set VSync enabled. There we go. Now I'm going to do some small rerouting because, well, we're going to have quite a few of these settings that we are going to change. So we have the VSync. Then let's see, we have frame and window. So let's set frame rate limit. Let's run that one. Then we also will go ahead and we have the window mode, foliage, shadow, texture. So then we want to set full screen mode. So that's going to be for full screen windowed. So we can change that by running this node. Then we can go ahead, set foliage quality. And then next one would be set shadow quality. So as you can see, this is very simple. So you need to basically set these. And then we're going to need to do some other steps. First, we need to run these all. So then we have the texture quality. And let's see, what am I else missing? So we have window mode, foliage, shadow, texture. And the last one is the resolution. So we want to set resolution, set screen resolution, like so. Here we go. And so, but the difference in this is a little bit, well, that we need to provide the values. We need to do some tiny bit of calculation on our own to figure out what exact values we need. As you noticed, maybe for the full screen mode, it's a little bit easier because we have the enums, so we could do some trickery over here. But we're going to try to stay, and we'll use the same idea behind all of these. So what we need to do next is promote these guys to variables to make our life a little bit easier. So I'm going to drag from the enabled, and I'm going to promote this to a variable, and I'm going to rename this to from enabled to VSync. Then we're going to have the frame limit. So I'm going to call this frame limit. Here we go. In full screen mode, I'm gonna leave it be. That's gonna be a good enough name, I believe. Then we have the foliage quality. So again, drag from that, promote to a variable, foliage quality. And we're gonna need also a shadow quality. Shadow quality, and then we have the texture quality, and we have the resolution, which this name is going to be good. So this will allow us to, once we set these variables, we can then set these using this specific code right here. Now this is all good. But before it actually does something, because it's going to set these values, but it's not going to apply them. So after we are done with setting these values, we want to go ahead and drag again from the user settings, and we want to apply these settings. There we go. So this is going to apply and save. There is also a node called save settings, but if you hover over this, it says save the user settings to persistent storage, automatically happens as part of apply settings. So technically it should save those settings from this apply settings node, so we are good with this. There we go. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and actually set these variables up. So for that we have these OnClick events. Now for VSync, super simple. All we got to do is set our VSync boolean on both of these, so on plus and on minus, and obviously the plus one is going to be true. That's going to enable VSync, and the other one is going to disable it. Now frame rates, let's go ahead, let's grab our frame limit, and what I'm going to do from here is, again, we need to set these values. So at the end of these we just go ahead and set these. But to get the actual numbers that we provide here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a plus float over here, because that's my frame plus, and I'm going to do float minus float, because that's going to remove some frames. And then I'm also going to clamp this float so it doesn't go extremely high, because we don't necessarily need to provide like 1000 FPS. That's a little bit useless. It's better to cap the FPS at something usually, so that because graphics card essentially is going to try to render as many frames as possible, but it's for the most part it's usually useless. It totally depends on the monitor's refresh rate, because if the monitor cannot refresh as fast as many frames as you have, it's basically those extra frames are basically useless. Now what I'm going to do for the increments, I'm going to change this to 30, so it goes like 30, 60, 90, 120, 150 FPS, and I also need to provide some kind of a max value. Minimum is going to be, well, this depends. Now if you want to leave this to have unlimited frame rate, it is all good to provide 0, because if you provide 0, that means that it is unlimited frame limit, not unlimited frames. Instead I'm going to have 30 for the minimum, so it cannot go below 30. I don't want to have unlimited FPS, so it's going to go from 30. And in this example, let's say it's going to go up until 150. Obviously, you can set this to whatever you like. I'm going to leave this at 150 for now. That's all good for the frame limits. Now, the next one is the window mode. So full screen, windowed, whatever else. We had another one, which is windowed full screen. So we're going to set that up. Again, on all of these, at the end, we just set the value. And what I'm going to do here is enums are bytes, and they have their indexes. So essentially full screen is 0, windowed full screen is 1, and windowed is 2. Now we can use this logic to basically do a +1, but if we do plus, we can do byte plus byte, and well, it's gonna be a little awkward, because we can go out of the bounds, because we cannot clamp this value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to int. So this is basically going to convert from the enum to an integer number. So I'm going to do that, and from here I'm going to do a plus, integer plus integer, and I'm going to do the same thing over here, except integer minus integer. Then again, we're going to clamp these values so we stick inside of the range, so it doesn't go above or below the range, so it always stays there. And the next one is just go ahead, and I think we need to byte. We gotta go to the byte. Let's see, can we, what is this? This is e window mode. So if we e window, yeah, it doesn't work. So we need to go to byte, and then we can plug this in, and it's going to create like a double converter. It's going to go from a regular byte into a specific enum, like so. Now we need to do the same thing, so to byte, and then we go and set this up. There we go. Now we need to clamp these. So the default value is the full screen, which can be 0, all good, but the maximum value is the windowed, which is 2. So we need 0, 1, 2. All those are all the possibilities that we can have. So just clamp those like so it doesn't go above those values. There we go. Now the next one, foliage. Pretty much exactly the same logic as we just did. So again, we want to set the variables like so. And then we can go ahead, get our foliage, and we can do integer plus integer, and we can go ahead and do integer minus integer. Then we are going to clamp these values, even though in the node itself, if you hover over the set foliage quality node, it's going to tell you that it clamps itself if necessary, but I prefer to clamp these values on my own. So we're going to connect these, and the values are, if you, like I said, if you hover over, so we have this foliage, you will see that it is 0 till 4. So if you hover over the value, it says 0 is low, 1 medium, high, epic, cinematic, and gets clamped if needed. Now I'm gonna clamp it myself, but I will remember that the clamp needs to be 0 till 4, and it applies for the shadow and texture as well. So my clamp is gonna be 0 up until 4, like so. Now to make this go a little bit quicker, I'm gonna copy all of these nodes except for the event nodes, and I'm gonna paste these in over here, and I'm gonna make sure to connect the execution pins, and I'm gonna copy this over here as well, so to shadow and to texture qualities, because all of them use integers. Now what we can do is just go ahead, grab our variable, so in this case the shadow quality, and drop it on top of this one. So don't drag it on top of the name because it says make. What you want to do is drag it and drop it on the beginning when it says change. So once we do that, it's going to change it. We can drop it on top of here, it's going to change it, and on top of here we can change it as well. Same exact idea for the texture. Drag and drop, drag and drop, drag and drop. There we go. So now our foliage quality, shadow quality, and texture quality is all set up. Now the next one is the resolution. Now I cannot set this because it requires us an X and Y, and this is the resolution. So the more common one would be the 1920 by 1080, but well, I don't want to use it this way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create us a new variable, and I'm going to call this resolution index. And this is going to be an integer, and is going to help us decide which resolution we want to use. Now what I'm going to do is again copy this bit of code once more. So we're going to connect that over here. There we go. Connect this one. So we have this bit of code copied and pasted, and now let's replace the shadow quality node with the resolution index instead. There we go. So we have those set up, and let's see if I can figure out 5 resolution sizes. If not, we might have to, if it's going to be less, we might have to change the clamp. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to do a, well, let's drag it in our resolution index first. Let's get that, and then let's do a switch on integer, because we are changing this integer, and then based on that integer we will provide a default different resolution size. So we have 0 till 4, we have a switch 0 till 4, and on every single one of these we want to set this value up. So I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to split the values like so, like so. There we go. So this way now I can provide the values. So if I was too quick, right click the value. When we set it, you just right click and split it, and you can right click it and recombine it as well. So we have these values. Let's start providing these. So let's start off with the big boy, which is the 4K one, I believe, which was 3840 by 2160. The next one, if I'm not mistaken, was the 2K, I think. Let's hope so. Let's try this out. Let's see, like 2560 by 1440. And then let's have the more common one, the 1920 by 1080. Then let's have something a little smaller, which is the 1600 by 900. And then let's have the 1280 by 720. Obviously you can provide any resolutions you want. Just try to Google them, so you hit like the resolutions that can actually be used. These are all, I believe, 16 by 9. So maybe you want to provide some more options that are not 16 by 9, but like 21 by 9 or whatever other the sizes of the monitors is. But this is all good for this one right here. We are providing the resolutions, and this is all good. Now, this is all good. This is all good. We are setting the values. Everything seems to be nice. And well, now we actually need to apply these. So what I'm going to do is back in the designer, I'm going to add another button. And I'm going to drag this button on top of the vertical box. And this button right here is this one. And I'm going to rename this to apply. And I'm also going to add a text on top of it. And the text is going to say apply as well. Now let's restyle this to the same as we did with the other ones. So this is going to be a black button, and that's it with a white text on top of it. And also I'm going to select this button. I'm going to set this to fill and anchored to the bottom. There we go. So now it's going to stay at the bottom nicely. There we go. So now back in our graph, what we can do is look for our apply button on click, and this code that we created, this long line up here at the top, we can launch that on apply. Here we go. So now this is going to change our settings. But before we can actually like run this, usually I think this should run fine if you run this for the first time, but it's a good idea to maybe grab the default values that you might have. Maybe you have stored them inside of your drive from the previous launch of the game. So let's go ahead and let's do that. We're going to do that on event construct. Here we go. And then we're going to get game user settings, just like we did before. But the next thing that we need to do is we need to load those settings. So now this is going to load the settings from the, as you can see, loads the user settings from persistent storage. So basically the ones that you have already saved in the memory. And now from here, well, we will need to get all of our values again. So from the user settings, I'm going to create a reroute over here, maybe a little bit lower. And what we now need to do is we need to get all of our settings. So from here, some of them don't have like the get word in front of them, so just type in what it is. So we have the VSync, that is one of the examples. VSync is called is VSync enabled. So we want to go ahead, grab that one. And also we want to frame limit, so we want to get the frame limit. And then the next one would be full screen, so we want to get full screen mode. That's going to tell us in which mode it is right now. Also we want to foliage quality, we want to get that one. We want to get the shadow quality and the texture quality. And what else we got? Texture quality, and then we have the resolution. Get screen resolution. There we go. So we have all of those, and now we gotta set those. So we have the VSync, so we want to set that to this one. We have the frame limit, which is this one. Then we have the full screen mode, which is this one. Foliage quality, shadow quality, and the texture quality, and the resolution. So now it gets all the values that it has stored in the memory, except for, well, we also need the resolution index as well. We want to set this as well. There is no, since I made that variable up, it wasn't in the settings. Well, we got to do some trickery now to set it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these nodes right here. I'm just going to copy these for now, just so that I remember those sizes, so I don't make a mistake, because it's very important to know the correct sizes. Now what I'm going to do here is a bunch of if branches. Now there's going to be a couple of them, but I haven't thought of a better way how to do this. So I'm going to have 5 if branch checks, because we have 5 possible resolutions. So we're going to have this, and then at the end of all of them, we're going to, on true, we're going to set the resolution indexes. So we're going to run those like so. So on true route, we're going to set those. Here we go. And let's set up the indexes. So we will have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. Now from the false routes, we're going to go to the next if branch check. We're going to go to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, like so. All good. Now the next thing that we need to do is, let's go ahead, let's drag from our resolution and let's break this in point, and it is going to return us the X and Y coordinates. Now you have two options. You can either check one, or you can check both, or you can check the other. It's totally up to you. Since all of the values are unique, there are no repetitive values. This is very simple. All I'm going to do is check the X, and I'm going to make sure that the X is equal to, for the top one, 1280 instead, 1280. Connect that like so. Another branch, not branch, but another Boolean check, which is going to be if the X is 1600. Let's copy this a couple of more times. We need 1, 2, and a third one as well. And X in all of the top ones, like so. And then let's provide the values. So we have, this one is the 1920, this is the 2560, and this is the 3840. There we go. So now it is going to grab those values and it's going to set up our resolution index so that it is easier for us to change it. There we go. So at this point, so we can delete these set nodes. Those were just so that I don't mess up the numbers. At this point, we should be ready to roll. So let's try this out for a second. So I have frames on the side of the screen. As you can see, we hit the P key event. Boom. It's not going to tell us anything as of right now, but we can try to experiment with this. So we know if we click this maximum till on the left side, like minus it, it should cap the frame rate at 30. So if we hit apply, boom, we have 30. So now let's change some other settings. Let's say we let's change our Windows setting to, that's going to be full screen. Let's change this to window, and let's change the resolution to the smallest one. Apply. There we go. Let's bump up our frame rate. There we go. 90 frames. I clicked it twice. I clicked it once. It should be now at 60. There we go. Foliage quality. Let's set this down. Good. Close it all off. So we have 60, and let's bump the shadow quality and texture quality down as well. Apply that. So there you go. So no shadows and all that stuff. So we hit escape, we hit play again. Boom, we still have the same exact settings. So let's say we want to bump up the frame rate. Apply. Frame rate is a little bit better. What happened to the resolution though? Nothing happened. Everything's good. So it's just like, I guess, a weird glitch. Because everything else should stay exactly the same. Now, let's make sure that we can actually see the values that we provide so that we actually know that they stay in their exact positions. So back in the designer, now we got to go through all of these texts and we got to create bindings for every single one of these. So we have the first text, which is the window mode. So go ahead, find the content, bind, create a binding. There we go. Now this is the, I should have named this or something. So this is the window mode. So you can go ahead and change the function names as well. So this is just the text. So let's get window mode. There we go. And let's provide something to this. Now this is very simple. All we got to do is grab our in full screen mode variable. Let's get that. And we cannot provide this directly, but we can go to a string. We can go enum to string, and then the string is able to be, it's possible to connect it to the text. I guess that's text. Yeah, that's text. So we can compile and save this, hit play, hit P, windowed full screen, full screen. There we go. So you can set this to full screen, boom, apply it. Well, it's not going to work the greatest in the editor because it's never a full screen, but we can't move it because it thinks it's a full screen. But yeah, in the editor, it's not going to be perfect, so to say. But in the shipped build, it's going to be exactly like you would imagine it to for the Windows mode. Let's go ahead, let's set up the resolutions. Back in the designer, select the next one, create a binding, and for this one, what we are going to do is grab our, instead of using the resolution index, we're going to grab our resolution because that's going to be the active one. We're going to get that, and we are going to go ahead and, well, let's right click and let's look for a node called append, which is going to make a string for us. I prefer using strings. You could make this from a text as well, but I'm going to use this one. And then what we can do over here is we can break the in point to get the X and Y, add a third pin for our strings, and we can plug in X in the A and the Y in the C, and just type in a X in between. And this way now you will see that it's going to give you a result like this. So 1280 times 720, this one, this one, this one, this one. So I'm going to leave it this one so it doesn't go above my screen limits because this is my screen resolution. And yeah, we are good to go. There we go, that's saved. So back in the designer, let's speed it up a little bit. Shadow quality, select the text, create the binding. This is going to be a little bit different because now we have a number instead of something else. So was this the foliage? No, this is the shadow quality. So let's grab our shadow quality variable. Let's get that, and let's do a switch on the integer because we will have different values and different outputs. So we have 4 of those, and what we are going to have over here is 4 return nodes. So we're going to have 4 of those. So 3, actually 5. So we're going to have, because we have 0 till 4. So we have 5 return nodes, and just type in the values. So we have low, we have medium, yeah, that's medium, and then we have the high, and then we have the epic, and we have the cinematic. There we go. Now what I'm going to do from here to make my life a little bit easier in the future, I'm just going to copy these nodes back in the designer, select the texture quality, create binding for that one, delete the return node, paste this in, and connect the, oh my god, my memory, texture quality, compile and save this, back in the designer, foliage, create a binding, delete that one, paste this in, boom, foliage, here we go, compile and save this. What else we have? VSync. Cool. We create a binding, and this again is very simple. We grab the VSync variable and we just plug that in directly, and it's going to say true or false. Obviously you can also do a if branch check, for example, and then you can provide 2 outputs. You can call this on or off, enabled or disabled. So if this is true, we're going to say on. If it's not, we are going to say off, like so. The designer frame rate. So we're going to create a binding, and for this one I'm just going to plug in the variable directly. So we're going to have the frame limit, we're going to get that, plug that in, that's it. It's going to tell us the number. So now hit play, hit P, here we go. These are the settings that I left on. So we're going to turn this off, set these maybe to a medium. As you can see, we cannot go above or below those limits. So I'm going to have it 60, apply. Here we go. Change this to something smaller. Boom, close the game. Blah, blah, blah. Hit play again. Hit P. We are back with the same settings. So as you can see, this is way more simpler, way more faster, way more understandable in my opinion. There's not that many nodes. Well, there's still quite a few of them, but I think this way, this is a lot better. Now also remember that you can store these variables that we have over here anywhere in the project. I decided to keep all of this information in the widget because in this way we this is the location where we do all the changes, and this is where we store all the necessary variables. They stay here. We don't need anything else. And I think this is the best location for all of this information, essentially. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. If you enjoy my content and you haven't subscribed already for some reason, feel free to do so. I upload quite frequently. I also have a Discord with a lot of amazing people who help each other. And you can, yeah, come here and ask all kinds of questions if you have any. And yeah, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.